And I will hand it over to Michael to take it away.
Okay, thanks, Christine. All right, if it's okay with everybody, I do have a brief PowerPoint up. I'm not going to put it in slideshow mode because it does terrible things in Zoom sessions. So I'm just gonna use it as like a scaffolding, and you can see the main picture on the screen, and we'll just go with that. So yeah, we've had this session in the works for about a year now, and you know, we're going to be going over some tools that have been developed over time to help measure, whether rightly or wrongly, they are now tools that are incorporated in helping to measure faculty productivity. Some of them were developed for different purposes and have just kind of gradually evolved into that role over time. And along the way, we'll talk about how to get to them and whatnot. So why don't I'll start out by going to the list of journal metrics that we're going to either cover or we're going to give honorable mention to. And the ones that we're going to cover the impact factor that's available through Web of Science. And I'll talk a bit about site score, SGR, SciMago, a little bit about the eigenfactor, and the H-index gets honorable mention right now because it's mostly, historically, it's been an author productivity index. It is more and more showing up as a measure of journal productivity, but it's not something that we're going to talk about a great deal. You'll find H-index measures in the SciMago, on the SciMago page, and I think in Scopus as well, if I'm not mistaken. But that's all we're going to say about that one. So first of all, we're going to talk about the impact factor and Web of Science. And as we get into that, I should point out at the very outset that we've had to make some decisions as far as our collection is concerned, and we had to make a tough choice in this last budget cycle between Scopus and Web of Science. And depending upon your want, Scopus won the battle, and so our subscription to Web of Science will be will finish. I think Christine, correct me if I'm wrong. It finishes in December of this year. And
that is correct. Yes.
And so it'll be going away after that. So the comments that we make and showing you the process of generating those stats in Web of Science, that's going to be of temporary value to you now, but there are other ways of getting the data, and we'll be talking about some of those. And if all else fails, you have us as resources to turn to, and we will do our best to make sure that you get the data that you need if you need impact factor data. So don't feel like you're going to be out there on your own. We will be there to support you still, just in different ways. So, all right. So let me just switch out here to the browser, and okay, so impact factors are associated with Clarivate Analytics, which owns Web of Science, and Web of Science is the vehicle through which you get to the impact factor, or the I forget the shorthand for it, but basically to get to your impact factors, once you're in Web of Science, you just come over here.
Michael,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but you're still on the PowerPoint.
Oh, bother. Okay, hang on a second. My apologies, folks. Let me stop share and let's try that again. Thought I had it set for, okay, screen 1. Let's keep it on screen. No, screen 2. That's the one we want. Click share. Okay, are you seeing Web of Science now? You should be looking. Okay, good. And hopefully that fixed it so that it'll stay on whatever I'm looking for on this screen. All right. So in Web of Science, there's a little Rubik's Cube type icon up in the right-hand corner under products. If you click that link, it's going to take you to JCR. That's what I was looking for, Journal Citation Reports. And that's the repository for your impact factor information. So you can click on that and it'll take you in there. And of course, I've got multiple sessions going, so it will eventually time you out. This is what the search engine looks like. I've already got a previous search done here for pharmacological reviews, but we could do one for, let's just do one for, let's go nursing scholarship. Just do something new. Okay, and all you got to do is either put in the ISSN or put in the first part or whatever part of the title you want, and it'll auto complete it for you. You just find the entry that you're looking for in the list, and if you have a generic sounding title, it'll bring up as many as it's got in its database. Click that. It'll bring you to the landing page that it has for that journal, and it'll give you the basic stats up the top, and then immediately below that, it's got your journal impact factor data. You've got the raw score here, and then you've got the a refined score here that takes out the self-citations. And right at the top, under impact factor, it gives you a little kind of public notice. Journal impact factor is a journal level metric calculated from data indexed in Web of Science core collection. Should be used with careful attention to the many factors that influence citation rates. And then it talks about some of those. But the point I want to highlight here is that even within Clarivate Analytics, there is this acknowledgement that impact factors, while they have their purpose, they also come with certain limitations. It's good to be aware of those limitations, and we'll talk a bit about some of those a little later on. But yeah, even they're aware of it, and so it's just one of those things. It's good to know the limits of the tools you use when you're using them. What the impact factor measures is citation usage. So it calculates a rate of citation for a hypothetical average citation in whatever journal that you're in. So for the Journal of Nursing Scholarship, for the year in question, which would be 2021, it calculated an average rate of citation of almost 4 citations per article. And when you're in this database, it will give you graphics that show you how the metric was calculated. And this is a good illustration of how the process works. So the formula is it does a backward glance from the previous whole year. In this case, we have the entirety of 2021 behind us, and I'm sure this data will get updated fairly soon once they have all the data available for all the journals. But right now, the best we have is 2021. So citations in 2021 to items published in the previous 2 years, 2019 and 2020. And then that's divided by the number of citable items in those 2 preceding years, 2019 and 2020. You divide the one by the other, and that gives you your rate of 3.928. And like I said before, this is a raw score. It includes self-citation. They take the self-citations out in this version, and they show you how they remove those. They identified 12 self-citations in the 2019 citation results and 8 in 2020. They add those, they subtract those from that initial sum, and then they divide that total again by the citable items for those previous 2 years. And that's how they arrive at that. Now, sorry, okay, so historically, this particular metric has not been without its critics. Anecdotally, I'm aware of the fact that when journal impact factors were originally designed and rolled out, that they were intended, I believe, originally as a collection development tool. They were originally intended for libraries, to help libraries make the most of their dollars. Libraries, especially academic libraries, are notoriously, well, we have to make hard choices, difficult choices, as we had to make this year between Scopus and Web of Science. And tools like this were designed to help us ensure that we got the journals that everybody was looking at, and fewer the journals that people weren't. One of the problems with the impact factor is that the Pareto principle applies to the literature. There's a guy named P.O. Seglin. He did a study. He did a bibliometric analysis of high citation journals in 1992, and he found that the top 15% of high citation articles in a high citation journal accounted for 50% of all citations for that journal. and the remaining 90% were accounted for by the first 15%. Sorry, the first 50%, 50 cited journals. The highest citing journal articles accounted for almost 90% of the total citations for that article. And what that means is that you know, if you're going just on that hypothetical metric, it's concealing as much as it's revealing. You know, they're you know, so on average, the highest performing articles in a particular journal are outperforming the lowest performing ones by a factor of 10. So that can be it can make it problematic to rely on the impact factor alone as a measure of you know, of citation performance, you know, for everybody. So so there's that to consider. Let me just go back here to my notes here. We've covered that. We covered journal impact factors are not statistically representative of individual journals. I've covered both of those. Another issue with them is that journals in fields that are, especially in the basic sciences, journals where information obsolesces quickly and where citation counts are highest, they tend to have massive impact factors, especially in the sciences and biomedicine, whereas in other fields, especially the humanities, they don't do quite so well. But even in fields like mathematics, if you have a stable knowledge base, you have much lower citation rates, and therefore your counts are different. So that makes it difficult with impact factors to do comparisons across disciplines. So you really can only use impact factors to assess like journal quality, journal rates, you know, rates of citation within the same discipline or field. All right. So let's switch gears now, and I want to, now that I've talked a little bit about the journal impact factor and how you get to it, how you do it, I'd like to compare that against the SJR, the SCImago journal rank. And I'm using a graphic that's provided by Curtin University on their LibGuide demonstrating impact. Okay, so they just do a comparison of the two. Of course, obviously, the impact factor is drawing on Web of Science. SCImago data is coming from Scopus, whereas the impact factor is a measure of citation impact with the SJR. It's a measure of journal prestige. Now, I'm not exactly sure how they're defining prestige, but I do know that they have a weighting for, so they're looking at citation rates, but they're not just looking at citation rates. They're looking at the relative weight of the journal providing the citations. So and again, I don't know how they're assessing prestige, but if a journal is more prestigious, that's going to be reflected in the mark that they give. How the process works very, very similar to impact factors. With impact factors, all document types, if there are citations to any document type, that's going to be included in your denominator. Sorry, it's the numerator that's on the top and the denominator on the bottom. Okay, so all document types are going to be citations to all document types will be in the numerator in your impact factor. With SJR, they're a little bit more restrictive. So they focus only on citations that are coming from research type literature, so articles, conference papers, and reviews, and the denominator reflects citable materials from that same population of stuff. So they're getting citation data for articles, conference papers, and reviews, and they're dividing that by the number of articles, conference papers, and reviews in those 2 or 3 years worth of citable material that they're referencing. Is that making sense? Is that clear enough? I can let me go over here. Okay, so this is another illustration of the impact factor. Okay, so you've got your citations from year 1 and year 2, and they're drawn from any citation at all in that journal. Okay, and then you've got your citable publications from those journals from year 1 and year 2. Okay, so I feel like I'm not being clear here, but basically, the way the impact factor works with Clarivate, they kind of pad the top because they're adding stuff from editorials and letters to the editor. Any citations at all, whether it's coming from a research article or not, gets added to that top, and so it skews it a little bit. And what SJR does is it corrects for that by only dividing, between, it draws on citations from this one class of material, and then it divides by citable material from those same classes. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to assume so. All right. So where you can't make interdisciplinary comparisons with impact factors, you can with SJR. It has a normalized, it's been normalized to account for differences in disciplines. And when you actually go to the SJR site, you see that. So we could go to their journal rankings. I don't want to worry about that. Okay. And then it gives you just a list, and it breaks it down. The SJR breaks down your display by quartiles. And it's color coded. So the top performing journals are in the first quartile, as you would expect, and then it goes down, second quartile, third, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll notice that these are, in terms of discipline and topic, they're kind of all over the place, as you would expect, because science journals tend to have higher citation rates. There is very good representation of the sciences and biomedicine in this list, but it's not just science and biomedicine. You've got economic journals in here. You've got a political journal, political economy, et cetera, et cetera. So it is able to make those comparisons to the extent that that's important. There's a difference in the knowledge base on which these two metrics are drawing. The journal impact factor is coming from Web of Science, and it's coming from two sub-databases within that: the Science Citation Index Extended and the Social Science Citation Index. And cumulatively together, those two indexes have 12,000 plus journals that they index. Scimago is drawing on about 22,000 plus, again, drawing on the Scopus knowledge base. All right. All right. I've got one or two more things that I want to mention in relation to the impact factor. The first is that and you probably would have observed this yourself if you've gone and you tried to look up an impact factor for either a fairly new journal or one that's not well known. Not every journal has an impact factor. Frequently, you'll find if you do a search in JCI that there will be other metrics. If the journal is represented, there'll be other metrics, but there isn't necessarily an impact factor. And the reason for that is that journal impact factors require at least 3 years worth of data. Okay. Again, remembering that you're looking back. So for 2021, we're looking at 2020 and 2019 to get our measurements. If you don't have at least 3 years worth of data, it can't calculate an impact factor. And there are other reasons too, like, a journal has to be a part of the Web of Science knowledge base for it to be included and have those metrics. So, as extensive as the knowledge base is for Web of Science, that there are journals that are just missed by its catchment, so they just don't get included. All right, so for future reference, since we are looking at a time in the not too distant future when we're not going to have access to impact factor, what are some ways that you can access the impact factor data even without immediate access to Web of Science? Well, two ways are immediate ways are to do a Google search, because believe it or not, that data will come up from time to time. So I could do a search for JAMA psychiatry. And sometimes it will just, it'll show me a raw number. Sometimes it won't. For JAMA Psychiatry, looks like I'm gonna have to go directly into the publisher's page. And at this point, what I can do is I can do a Control F search, just type in impact factor. And if it's got one, it'll show it. It doesn't look like it does though for this one.
Michael, if you go back to the Google search, it was over on the right-hand side of the page.
Okay.
You just,
okay, there it is. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, talking too fast here, yeah. Now, the thing, I tend to trust impact factor data that's coming directly from the publisher more than stuff that's coming off the web, because they're less likely to fudge the data. So if I were to do a search for JAMA Psychiatry in here just to confirm that, go to JAMA Psychiatry, go into, all right. So their impact factor in Web of Science is 25.936, and going back here, it's 25.91. So, yeah, they rounded down, and that happens. It's pretty close though. It's pretty close to what we got from Web of Science. And I'm just trying to find one that's coming directly from the web. So let me go back here and let's go with New England Journal. See if they got one there. Same situation. Sometimes, of course, you got the impact factor there that's coming from the publisher. Wanted to show you one that's coming from a non-publisher source. I'll try one more, and if this doesn't work, I'll just stop. But let's go. Oh, hang on a second. We've got pull one up that I was working on earlier. American Journal of Respiratory Cell and Molecular Biology. Let's try that one. Okay. Okay, well, trust me when I say that sometimes you'll put in a journal name and it'll just spit out a number here. I tend to be careful with those just because they're not sourced, they're not, and you know, you just don't know where the data is coming from. So I would always, if it's the only source of that metric and I really needed it, I would put it down, but I would always try to confirm that either by consulting with my librarian or talking to a colleague who might have who might be able to help you with that. So those are two ways, those are two workarounds. And yeah, of the two, the more accurate is just going directly to the website and finding the data there. All right. Any questions? Any questions about impact factors, how to find them, and how to find them without a Web of Science? All right, I'll turn it over to Christine now.
thank you, Michael. And I will kind of be building off a lot of what Michael said, but I am going to share my screen too. There we go. All right. The other big indexing, excuse me, impact factor type of metric that we wanted to talk about is from Scopus, and that is the site score. So if you are, and I think all three of you are WISE library users, you can go over here to the S and go to Scopus, and that will open up, and you'll want to click over here to sources. And we can search by subject area, but of course, it's a lot of times easier to go by the title or by the ISSN. I am going with critical care, not acute critical care. And I will need to erase that. And I'm going down here. Well, notice this is open access, but I'll talk about that in a minute. And when you click into the journal page, it'll tell you when the Scopus coverage is. So not all journals are always indexed all the time in Scopus. And I believe the same is true of Web of Science. So this will let you know what coverage years they have. It gives you the information about the publisher, what the ISSN is. That was a lot. And the subject areas that are affiliated with the journal. And it gives you the site score. So the site score is very, very similar to the journal impact factor, in that they are looking at the number of possible citations divided into the number of actual citations for a period of time. And with the site score, they are going to use a 4-year window. As Michael mentioned, a 3-year window seems to be the optimum number of years to start getting some usable information out of that metric. But they go to 4 years just to include the most current year's information in there. And they just make that simple calculation and give you a site score. Something newer that Scopus has started doing is a site score tracker. And that will be posted. The site score is updated annually, but the site score tracker, they update monthly. And that's to give you an idea of what their trajectory of that particular journal is estimated to be. So you'll notice that the site score for 2021 was 14.2. There were 17,589 citations for that 4-year period, divided by the 1,240 documents. And right now, this is on a moving scale. So it goes from, let's see here, last updated on April 5th of 2023. So it would be going from April 5th of 2019 to April, 4th of 2023. So it's going on a sliding 4-year scale there. So you can see that there are far more citations that are going to be going into that, and more documents as well. Cheryl, it looked like you had your hand up.
I did. I must have missed a step. I got to Scopus. But how did you get to the journal?
Clicked on sources.
Sources. That's the step I missed.
And it will default to browsing by subject, but you can use the little pull down menu to change it to a journal title.
Got it.
Now, because of the difference in the number of years that they're using and the slight difference in the metrics, the site scores aren't going to be the exact same as the impact factor scores, right? I mean, that's just, you're going to have different numbers.
Okay.
But they tend to be in a similar ranking, right? So a 14.2 would be a pretty good score on Scopus. Whatever the Web of Science ranking is going to be, would be considered a pretty good ranking too, if that makes sense. So they are percentage wise, quartile wise, going to be similar. Does that make sense? I think, okay. Some other things that you can look at down here, they will tell you, speaking of percentiles, that this journal is ranked number 4 out of 89 in the category of critical care and intensive care medicine, which puts it in the 96th percentile. So of course, that means only 4% of the journals are better than this one or get better citations than this one. You can also take a look over here at the site score rank and trend. As I mentioned, it's number 4. So the highest ranked journal that Scopus indexes in the category of critical care and intensive care medicine would be American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine. But you can see critical care, you know, it's right up there too. And then the content coverage is nice too, because it shows you how many documents were published and indexed into Web of Science by that journal for a particular year. And you can look at the documents themselves. It'll pull up a full list. Or if I go back, you can view the citation overview. And well, of course, these are 2023, so a lot of them don't have citations yet, but you could see what documents have been published so far and which ones have already started being cited by other journals. Any questions on those particular aspects of the site score? No. Now, I chose this journal because it's open access, and I do want to kind of point out a couple of other things you can look at here. Number one, Michael mentioned looking up the journal, like Googling it to see if you can come up with an impact factor. And I'm going to try that by the ISSN. I don't know if it's going to work. Yeah. So up here, it says 19.33. And if Michael was in his Web of Science and looked, it would probably show off that that's pretty close. I think it was 19.338 or something when I looked at it the other day. Because this is an open access journal, I also want to look at it in the directory of open access journals. Not Philippines, just sometimes Google just doesn't work with me. So I want to look that up. And the reason I'm mentioning this is part of what's changing, I think, in academia and in publishing and in science in general is going to open access. As you know, a lot of the funding bodies are requiring that. We have our own programs here at the university to encourage you and to help you publish in open access journals. The directory of open access journals is one of the places where you can look at that. So here, it's not an impact factor, but the fact that it's indexed in the DOAJ indicates that this is at least a, I'm not supposed to say non-predatory, but it's legitimate. It's a legitimately published open access journal. And
why aren't you supposed to say that?
Tara told me that maybe we aren't supposed to say that. So she's our expert.
Litigation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Michael, was that something that our pal at the Retraction Watch would be able to tell us why not to?
Well, that's the reason Beale stopped publishing his list. He got sued. He and the University of Colorado got massively sued, and so he just made his list go away.
Yeah. So, but anyway, if something is indexed in the DOAJ, you're looking at something that's going to be legitimate. Let's just put it that way. And if you're asking Tara about those open access publishing agreements, that's probably going to be the first place that she looks for them. And I feel like sometimes I have seen impact factors listed on here, but I'm not seeing it now. So they may have done away with that. But anyway, that's just another place to go looking for information about them, I guess. We've mentioned a couple of times now, we do have our scholarly communications librarian, Tara Gollings, who is able to help with a lot of these things. And she actually has a guide over here. If you go on our library website, there's research guides by subject. And luckily for me, Tara popped up right here, but if she didn't, you could just go by owner. And click on her name and look at the Scholarly Communications Research Guide. And she has a tab in there about journal metrics. So it goes a little bit into those journal citation reports and the Scopus site scores, a little about the SCImago, the SJR that Michael was talking about before. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about the eigenfactor score?
Sure. So yeah, eigenfactor. Can I just share a screen again? Won't be a moment here.
Sorry, I just kind of threw that back to you.
No, that's fine. I was actually, I'd forgotten to mention the eigenfactor. Okay, so eigenfactor is a metric that popped up, I want to say like in the mid 2000s, and it was really big for a while. And it's still mentioned on a lot of library websites, and it's great, you know, for what it did. This is actually coming from. Sorry, what's showing on the page? It's the PowerPoint, isn't it?
Yep.
Let me just pull this over here. I'm on Google, but I forgot that I was on the wrong screen. Okay, so this actually comes from the eigenfactor.org organization, and it's just a set of illustrations that talk about how their process works. Visually, what they say is that their way of calculating citations, they think the way the scientific process works, it works by linking. So you start with one article and then you track to the next article and on and on and on. And so they try to capture that pedigree. So instead of just getting, you know, the previous 2 years, they try to get a better picture. They talk about it here in terms of scholarly references, join journals together in a vast network of citations. Our algorithms use the structure of the entire network instead of purely local citation information to evaluate the importance of each journal. It was, you know, it was great, and it provided another way of developing the data. And they used, instead of using like a 3-year window, they used a 5-year window. They were the first ones to do it. And after they did it, for a while at least, Clarivate was doing the same thing. They had their own 5-year impact factor, which has gone bye-bye. It seems to have vanished. It's not there anymore. But the eigenfactor seems to have stopped too. So if you go to their main page, let's go eigenfactor.org, or I'll just type it in here. And let's just type in, I'll just type in JAMA again, just Journal of American Medical Association. It'll give you really impressive looking statistics, and they give you both an eigenfactor and an article impact factor, and that's a really nice metric too. And you know, so they rank the individual articles' impact, not just like a hypothetical average. And if you go into the data, you'll see you know, charts down below where they talk about you know, the normalized, they'll do it like a charted comparison between the eigenfactor and the article factor. But if you look at the y-axis, it only goes as far as 2015. And I found, looking at the data, that, you know, wherever I turned, whatever journal I was looking at, it looks like they stopped doing their analysis in 2015. And I've seen no evidence that there's no evidence that they went out of business, other than the fact that the data aren't more current, and that all citations, all references to the eigenfactor seem to stop at about 2016, 2017. So it looks like this is no longer a metric that's active. But you know, so if you hear about it from time to time, as you may, it was a really innovative, you know, way of calculating things, and from a library collection development point of view, it had a lot of value, because it actually provided another chart where it calculated cost versus value. And from a librarian's point of view, from collection development, oh baby, that had real application. So I'm disappointed on that level it's not around, but it's not available anymore. So if you don't have access to the impact factor, we have all of those Scopus metrics, and there's also the H index in Google Scholar, but those are the main ones we have to work with now. All right. Did you want me to keep going, Christine, or did you want to jump back in?
Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. All right. So, just a few more slides to go through, you know, just to show you what's what and where it's coming from. So, the source of the impact factor data I already mentioned. For science journals, it's coming from the Science Citation Index Expanded in Clarivate's Web of Science. For social science data, it's coming from the Social Science Citation Index, also in Clarivate. JCR data, the eigenfactor data was also coming from Clarivate when it was available. And everything else is coming from Scopus Elsevier, so the site score and SGR is coming from there. Won't show the bibliography, but there are other good websites. So Christine showed you the website that Tara has put together and maintains. UT Health San Antonio also has another good website called Understanding Metrics, and I will try and email this out to y'all, but just to show you what it looks like and how to get to it. I actually used several of their pages for this illustration, but they do a good comparison of impact factors versus SJR. And they give you a little rundown of all the main types: SJR, Scopus, impact factor, etc. And then University of Illinois at Chicago also has another good guide on impact factors. Another good place to go for context. And this is their page. All right. Any questions? Or questions, comments, or concerns, I should say.